Welcome back as we start our exploration of the digestive system. Sometimes it's called the gastrointestinal system, but that implies it's stomach and intestines only, but there's a lot more. So we're going to stick with the more accurate term, digestive system. In the digestive system is where we have all of our organs located that have to do with processing the food that we take into our body. And they can be divided into two main groupings. The first is called the alimentary canal, which is just a tube. Think of a hose. It is a tube that starts in your mouth, ends at your anus, and this is the tube that you're putting food into. However, the food can clearly come out the other end unless it gets absorbed into your body. The second group of organs are the accessory organs. These are solid organs, not tubular structures, that have ducts and openings that have those organ secretions enter into the alimentary canal to help with the digestion of the food that you eat. So when we're talking about processing the food, there are four main steps. And I had trouble coming up with mnemonic, and then I just decided the word idea, students often misspell. Instead of IDEA, they spell it IDAE. And those are the letters of the four steps. So for food processing, just misspell the vowels at the end of the word idea. So that means the first step begins with an I, and that is ingestion. In other words, if I'm asking you about food processing, what happens on the plate, what happens in the pot, the pan, the kitchen, with the knife, that's not part of food processing. You actually have to ingest the food before you can proceed to any of the other steps. The second step is digestion. And there are two different types of digestion. The first is mechanical digestion, where we take something bigger and through various mechanisms, we make them into a lot of smaller particles. So the big reason for that is if something is big, this is its surface area. Whereas if you have diced that into little pieces, then you have a much bigger surface area because each of the little pieces has a surface area. And that is important for the other type of digestion, which is chemical digestion, because chemical digestion only occurs on the surface. So this is why mechanical digestion is going to precede chemical digestion. After digestion, the next step is to absorb the substances. And these substances are going to get absorbed into one of two structures. So the red structure, that red tubular structure there, is meant to represent it's being absorbed into the capillaries of the blood vessels, of the bloodstream. And what do you think the green structure represents? Stop and think, what have we covered that was green? Yeah. Some stuff goes into the lymphatic system. So if you remember from when we covered lymphatic system, that's great. But if not, we're going to cover it again today. And then that gives us the fourth step, which is to get rid of everything that wasn't absorbed. And that's called elimination, or you may call it defecation or pooping or whatever, going to the bathroom, doing a number 2. Okay. So those are the 4 steps in food processing. This entire process takes about 24 hours, plus or minus. Some people have faster, some people are slower. Some people can take 36, 48 hours. If you want to know how long it takes in you, then just eat something that you can tell when it comes out. One of the best things is like corn on the cob or eating beets. If you have corn on the cob, you can see the yellow pieces of corn in your poop. And if you have beets, you can see that your poop turns the water pinkish in color. This is one of the first things you learn when you have a baby and you start changing diapers. Then you realize, oh, I can see what they ate yesterday. So now let's look at the wall of the alimentary canal part of the digestive tract. So in this tubular structure, the center part is the lumen, and this is where the food is going to travel. So this is considered the surface, and as we move away from this lumen surface, this is called going deeper to this outer surface, which is in the peritoneal cavity. And so in the wall, there are 4 different layers. The innermost layer is called the mucosa. Deep to the mucosa is the submucosa. Deep to the submucosa is the muscularis externa. And then the outermost or deepest layer is called the serosa when it's covered in peritoneum. So I'm going to go through these 4 one at a time to let you know exactly what's going on with them. Because as you can see in this picture, there's a lot of details to cover here. So starting first with the superficial layer closest to the food, the mucosa. So the pink layer there is meant to represent the epithelium. And depending where we are in our alimentary canal, if we're up in close to our throat, or if we're down close to our anus, if we're in our stomach or small intestine or large intestine, this epithelium changes. So as we go along, you'll be seeing the various epithelium. Yes, this is something you'll need to learn. I want to point out that going up to the epithelium or going down from the epithelium, you can see that there are ducts that lead to these yellowish glands. And some of the glands are in the mucosa, whereas other glands go deep into the submucosa, but they'll all have their secretions going to the surface epithelium. The white part of the mucosa is called the lamina propria. And what this is areolar connective tissue. And then these greenish areas with the little dots, that's meant to represent malt. Specifically, it's showing lymphoid follicles. But there's just, you know, it can be diffuse, it can be nodular, it doesn't really matter. And then the deepest part of the mucosa is called the muscularis mucosa. And this is the layer of smooth muscles that's either 1 or 2 cells thick only. So it's super, super thin. But it's the dividing line for the end of the mucosa. And once you are deep to that, you are in the submucosa layer. So looking at the submucosa on this diagram, you see a lot of white again, and it's the same white stuff that we had in the mucosa. So we have more areolar connective tissue. We can have some of the glands coming down from the epithelium. And in this layer, once again, we can have more malt. And in the small intestine, remember the name for the malt Peyer's patches occurred. Looking over here at like 9 o'clock in the picture, I think you clearly can see that not only there are blood vessels, but there is a layer of nerves. So we have a nerve plexus here, which is known as the submucosal nerve plexus. In other words, it's telling you where it is. The nerve plexus in the submucosal layer. And this is only parasympathetic nervous system stimulation. The reason for that is when this is stimulated, the parasympathetic stimulation, that will cause these glands to increase their secretions for digestion. All right, so now we're done with the submucosa, and let's go to the 3rd layer. Do you remember what it was called? That's right, muscularis externa. And so the muscularis externa has multiple muscle layers, as I will show you shortly. And once again, we have a nerve plexus. Now this nerve plexus is between the layers of muscle in the muscularis externa, and it has both sympathetic and parasympathetic. So with sympathetic, the smooth muscle will contract, and with parasympathetic stimulation, it will relax. So this affects the motility, the motion of the ocean, or the contraction going on in the digestive system. Now this nerve plexus, it's not in the submucosa, so we're not going to call it the submucosal nerve plexus. We're going to call it the myenteric. So my, if you remember, that prefix means muscles, so it's between the 2 muscles, and enteric just means intestines, so it's between the 2 muscle layers in your intestines. So when we're looking at the digestive tract, the baseline orientation of muscles of the digestive tract is that there are 2 layers. So if this is your digestive tract, the inner layer so we're talking muscularis mucosa, we're not talking muscularis mucosa, we're talking muscularis externa. So in the muscularis externa, the superficial or the inner layer is circular. So when it contracts, it squishes the lumen down to squish whatever foodstuffs are in there. And then on the outer side, we have an outer longitudinal layer. So when it contracts, it will move foodstuffs along the pathway. So just remember inner circular and outer longitudinal for the two layers in the digestive system. However, this is not found everywhere in the digestive system. This is how it's found in the small intestine. Now, the other three main areas of your alimentary canal each have one deviation from that norm that we just said, the smooth muscle with the inner circular, outer longitudinal. So in the esophagus, that's special. There's going to be one deviation from that normal. In the stomach, there's going to be a different deviation from that normal. Not a deviation from the esophagus, but from the deviation that we see in the small intestine. And in our large intestine, once again, we're going to have a different deviation from the normal found structures. Continuing on with our wall, the outermost layer actually has two different names, and what name there is not like you pick, it tells you something about that portion of the alimentary canal. If that portion is intraperitoneal, that means it will have a simple squamous layer of visceral peritoneum on it, a simple squamous epithelium on it, because remember, it's an outermost surface, it has to have epithelium. And in that case, we call it the serosa. Now, if it is not on a surface, if it's what we call retroperitoneal, which you'll learn about shortly, we're not going to have the epithelium. We're just going to have the areolar connective tissue portion of this outermost layer, in which case we will use the word adventitia instead of serosa. All right. So with that, I am done describing this. Here is a new picture you haven't seen yet. I've left the labels for a couple of things just to help orient you. You should be able to label everything else. And if you have questions, come ask me. Otherwise, I will see you shortly as we continue or dive into our exploration of the digestive system, where we're going to start with ingestion.